Hi folks, welcome to another edition of Government Matters here on Focus Springfield. I'm your host Mike Dobbs, and today we've got a guy who's been here before, but it was a long time ago. We're glad that he's back to talk to him about what's happening, and that's the District Attorney for Hampden County, Anthony Gulluni. Thanks very much for coming by. Appreciate it.
Good to be back.
There's a lot going on.
Always.
So I want to, I've got the lightning round of questions here, although it's, so that's right. But I just want to, first of all, get an overall sense. There's a lot of issues, major national issues that are also Western Massachusetts issues, such as illegal drugs, undocumented immigrants, ghost guns. I was somewhat horrified to learn it was maybe a year and a half ago that there was some kid on Hancock Street, which is in my neighborhood, that was making ghost guns in his basement. This truly horrified me that it was, all you need is the instructions off the internet and a 3D printer, and you can make illegal firearms to sale. So there's a lot of stuff happening that we hear about nationally, and I know that it has implications here in Hampden County. So let's start off. Everybody has been talking about fentanyl, about the overarching presence of fentanyl, how it has replaced opioids. What are you seeing as district attorney when it comes to fentanyl and opioid use in our area? Do you think it's on the increase, the decrease? What's your sense?
Yeah, addiction is still the preeminent problem in Hampden County, across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, across the country, quite frankly. With our news cycle, things gain attention and then they seem to recede back. Addiction, really since the start of my tenure in 2015, has been a focal point. We started the Hampden County Addiction Task Force in 2016 with then Sheriff Ash, which now continues very strongly still with Sheriff Coachy as my partner. And we bring together folks from across the addiction and recovery communities to really work together in unison to break down silos, to work to save lives first and foremost, right? We want to make sure that folks understand their resources for recovery, understand their resources to protect themselves, and we work with the recovery and addiction communities to really effectuate that. And I think we've been very successful. But, you know, in Hampden County, the numbers for 2024 aren't out yet from the state, but it's been level the last few years, which in some ways is a victory. I looked at recent statistics around how overdoses are qualified. And now it's something like 90% of fatal overdoses test positive for the presence of fentanyl. Heroin is now a very small percentage. So for your viewership, these are all opioids. Heroin is the originator. Fentanyl became something that sort of imitated the impact and the feeling of heroin, but it's exponentially stronger and cheaper to make, and results in traffickers and folks producing these illegal substances to be much more profitable. So fentanyl has completely overtaken all other substances to really be the foremost danger and the cause of overdoses, fatal and non-fatal, in Massachusetts and here in Hampden County. So we continue our work both on the preventative side with our Hampden County Addiction Task Force, as well as my state police unit and task force that are under my purview, as well as our partnerships with local and federal law enforcement to make sure that we're going as far upstream as possible to get this stuff out of our neighborhoods and out of our streets. We work very closely with our federal partners, and it remains a priority for everyone involved. So we're attacking both ends, and that has been really the way in which I've tried to deal with it for my 10 years as district attorney. We're trying to help folks in the throes of addiction. We're trying to help kids understand how addiction can start, parents understand how addiction can start, and be in a preventative posture for things of that nature, as well as finding the people who are seeking to profit from addiction, right? You know, there's people who are suffering from addiction on one end of the spectrum, and there's people who profit from addiction. And those are our drug traffickers and dealers. And we're throwing the book at them as much as we possibly can in court. We've devoted a lot of resources, both investigatory resources as well as prosecutorial resources, in making sure we're identifying those who are trafficking and dealing drugs into our communities, those who are profiting from addiction, and holding them accountable and keeping them off our streets.
It's a very difficult process, obviously. Next topic on the lightning round here. We hear a lot about guns and illegal gun trade in New England, how drugs are frequently traded for guns and vice versa. But now we have this issue of ghost guns, and all you need is the templates from the internet and a 3D printer, and you can be making illegal firearms. And it has taken place here in Springfield. I know that for a fact. How big a threat is this to law enforcement, the fact that there are guns that cannot be traced and can be manufactured in someone's home?
Yeah, it worsens the threat that illegal guns and guns in the wrong hands already poses to our communities. And you know, we're in a place, unfortunately, that sees upwards of a couple dozen murders every year. Most of those are through and by illegal firearms, with juveniles or young adults possessing these guns and using them, unfortunately. So the issue of ghost guns now just adds to this threat, right? We are in the, you mentioned the trafficking of guns and guns coming from other places into the Commonwealth that has relatively strong gun laws. We are, in some ways, in the unfortunate geographic position to be very close to the state of Vermont that has really lax gun laws. So what we have seen in recent years is a trafficking of drugs, which are plentiful and relatively cheap here in this region, going up to Vermont, and guns, which are plentiful and relatively cheap in Vermont, coming down here. So there's that exchange. And it's obviously problematic and dangerous. So it's fueling some of the issues that we see in our cities, in our communities here in Hampden County. You know, we are in, again, that position where we have north and south, east and west in terms of our highways really sort of bisecting Hampden County. So we're dealing with that, and we deal with that with our state partners, our state police partners, and our federal partners as well that have that multi-state jurisdiction. And yeah, it's in the issue in particular of ghost guns and the ease with which people can essentially manufacture guns with a 3D printer in their basement, which we have seen here on a few occasions in this area in the last couple of years, again, just worsens that threat and adds to the number of guns that fall into the wrong hands. You know, fortunately, our legislature in the last year or so has tightened gun laws along with Governor Healy. Some things were met with some resistance by folks who have an interest in possessing guns, lawful gun owners. There were certain things that were added to the obligations that come with owning guns, and I understand that's sort of a different thing and really not my concern, but some of the things that the legislature did to enact statutes around ghost guns and around serialization and things that give prosecutors and law enforcement more tools to enforce laws and to make sure people are held accountable if they're producing guns and those guns are really have ill intent. You know, that's a big deal. And Representative Carlos Gonzalez here from the city of Springfield, of course, is the chair of public safety in the House of Representatives and has been a great ally of mine, and I think was a real driving force for those changes the legislature enacted in the last year.
Last on the lightning round, funding from the state. Are you getting the money that you need?
That's probably a topic we talked about, Mike, when I was here 6 or 7 years ago.
Right. Is it still a topic? Because I think
it's always a topic, right? Like, I mean, as everyone knows, and I think has been discussed by probably other elected officials with you on this program, there is an inequality north and or east and west in our state. I mean, there's an imbalance of population and power and resources in the Boston area as it relates to out here in Springfield. So I continue to scratch and claw for resources, continue to make the case and pound the dais to our legislature, to leadership, to our governor. You know, we have needs here, we need help. And to a large extent, I've been successful. I've been able to grow our reach, to grow my office in a way that meets needs and begins to reflect similar staffing levels for other DA's offices. But the task of prosecution and the way in which we engage with our community and the way in which we prosecute cases, which is a very intelligent way focused on people who are violent, people who endanger our communities, it's resource intensive. I had a question in a similar interview a week or two ago about, what's changed. It was with, in fact, Dave Mattson. It's gotten a lot harder to do this work. The law changes, the environment in which we've had to exist in the last 4 or 5 years as law enforcement, police, and prosecutors has made this job a lot harder. And my folks, each and every day, go into court and fight for victims. They fight for their communities. They fight for law enforcement. They fight to do the right thing. And that has really become a steeper hill every day on which we have to battle. But I've got great, devoted people, and I think we're doing a great job for Hampden County.
Do you have an opinion about the courthouse situation?
Yeah, I think I've said this publicly. I've said it for years. If we were 80 miles east, we would have had a new courthouse 10 years ago. I mean, there's no question about it. Absolutely. Right? And that's no knock on any elected official here or out in Boston. It's just a fact. We are often out of sight, out of mind. And we've had great elected leaders really try to make a lot of noise for this courthouse and other things. And I think finally it's resonated. We deserve a new courthouse. I think, in my 17 years or so in and out of that courthouse almost on a daily basis, there's security concerns there, there's space issues there, there's certainly issues around the health of the building and how that relates to people who are in it frequently. Back in whatever it was, 2020 or 2021, I walked my staff out of that building and stood on the courthouse steps saying enough, right? My people in that building were scared. There was mold on chairs and flags and walls that summer, and that really was after all the conversation about my dear friend Judge Boyle's health issues that he firmly believed were related to that courthouse and many other people who suffered illnesses and issues. So it's high time. I'm happy that there's been progress. I hope I'm around to see, a ribbon cutting at a beautiful new courthouse. And of course, it's out of my sort of purview, but it's important for the city of Springfield in the region to have a functional, safe, appropriate hall of justice, right? Where people access it for many, many things. And it's an economic driver too, presumably, when it's built and when it's operational.
Well, the fact that you moved your staff out of there sent a very clear signal that it's just not you as a DA, it's you as a supervisor of a staff, so you're responsible for them. And clearly being in that building is tough. I mean, I remember being in there doing a story and you could see mold on the law books in an office. I mean, that really indicates some very severe building problems when it's that apparent. But I'm personally, as a Springfield resident, I'm hoping that they can come to a site and this can move forward because it's still going to be a number of years before we have a new courthouse. You might be celebrating your 20th anniversary in office, quite honestly. So, that's not unrealistic at this point.
No.
So forgive me, I saw this on the news the other night. You were celebrating, and I couldn't remember the details because I am old and feeble. But you were celebrating the 5th anniversary of a program that your office has started. Can we talk a little bit about that and some of the other programs that people may not be aware of that your office does to address various levels of crime prevention or rehabilitation?
Yeah. It's something I'm very proud of. It's something I consider to be a hallmark of my 10 years in office, and I've had a few anniversaries in the last several months. One was my 10-year anniversary in office. Believe it or not, it's hard for me to believe. That was January 7th of this year. And also just yesterday, in fact, had our 5th anniversary of our emerging adult court of hope. So we've really tried from the onset of my administration to realize ways in which we can get ahead of crime, get ahead of bad decisions, do things to be preventative that will have an impact on public safety, right? With young people, with people of all ages, around all the issues that are pressing and threatening in our communities. One of the real, trophies and things I'm just so proud of is that Emerging Adult Court of Hope, which I'll talk about as briefly as I can. as I talked about at our anniversary, and the Lieutenant Governor, Kim Driscoll, was there to speak, and the Chief Justice of the District Court, and lots of other folks from the legislature, and Sheriff Kochi, all came to celebrate this. But initially it wasn't so celebrated. It was really sort of a radical idea. I realized that emerging adults, that 18 to 24-year-old population, was really struggling in our court system. I had experienced that in a number of ways. I was a diversion counselor through the Salvation Army in my early 20s. And then, of course, I was a district court and superior court prosecutor before I became DA. And you saw these kids, juvenile court a couple times, become adults at 18, district court, get probated, then they come back, then they go to jail, then it's felonies, then it's state prison, and it just gets worse, right?
It's sort of a cycle.
It's a cycle that, just gets much, much worse and really becomes irreversible. So, my team and I said in 2017, 2018, what can we do, for this population? There's got to be accountability, right? Some of these guys are violent, they're hurting people. We're not going to do this for everybody. But how can we give young people a lifeline who want it, who are willing to take it, give them what we have come to say really is a hand up, not a handout, right? So we spent years on developing this program, ended up getting the buy-in of the trial court, probation, ROCA, really put a coalition together to start this court that, to me, still now is one of one nationally, certainly the only one in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And it takes kids, and I say kids, but they're adults in the eyes of the law, and they should be adults. I'm not one who is a proponent of raise the age at all. But it takes this subset of young people, 18 to 24 years old, who by and large, if not all the time, have had really, really tough lives, right? They're born into tough situations. And it's really helped me reflect on the privileges that I have and how lucky I am to have the parents and all the support that I had through my life. But these kids come up, trauma, abuse, poor role models, bad environments, kids around them doing the same stuff, looking for trouble, and that cycle, as we just talked about, it starts and continues. So we devised this court, and it takes people who want to opt into the court. They choose with their lawyer, this is my opportunity to avoid jail, and the cases that we're picking are cases that are almost certainly going to result in jail for these individuals, right? And probably they're at that cliff, and they're going to fall over if they don't take this lifeline. So they take the lifeline, and we surround them with comprehensive support, holistic support. With ROCA and the probation department and the way the court works, it's different than anything else that you'll see in that courthouse. And we get these young people through 4 phases where they start with just work through ROCA, grunt work, labor, and they learn every day, hey, I got to get up, I got to be accountable, I got to show up on time, I got to be respectful, I got to work hard. And they start that muscle memory process that a lot of us started when we were kids, right? Because we saw our parents, or we had a job when we were 15, or whatever it might be. But for these young people, that's kind of a foreign thing in many cases. And really the court is about that accountability, that love, that support. And we see these young people, 19, 20 years old in some circumstances, they're like, these people care about me? They've never had anything like that in their lives. And really the intention, and this was very important to me, is to get them through those 4 phases towards a career. And they start with jobs, and I've had jobs, you've probably had jobs, and by that I mean working at Dunkin' Donuts, or working at a park, or construction. Nothing wrong with it, right?
Nope.
But a career for these young people is something that I think is life-changing. It provides them with hope for their future, provides them with stability, with an income with which they can sustain themselves and any dependents, family, kids they have, and optimism, right? I can see a path for myself, because if they don't have that hope by way of a career, they're going to go back to the same stuff, right? The same bad guys, the same guns, the same drugs, the same street corner, because $15 an hour is not going to cut it for them. And they know what the alternative is, and they're going to go back to it, and then they're going to be back in the courthouse. If we give them a career, they're going to walk, and they're never going to turn around. And we've had 7 graduates. Couple have CDLs. They all have careers. They're all doing positive things. None have reoffended, knock on wood. And, the future is very bright for this court and for many, many participants who are going to turn their lives around through dint of their own hard work, right? It's accountability. It's difficult. It's a challenge for them. Believe me, it's not a slap on the wrist, but they have this opportunity to change their lives. And we're just incredibly flattered and happy that so many young people are taking the opportunity, and we've been successful. We've had a great 5 years filled with joy and celebrations, but also heartbreaks and frustration and learning opportunities. So we're going to continue to build on that. We have the support of so many different people now, and it's really been an amazing journey for us.
This is not an easy thing that you're doing.
No, easy is a word that never comes into our meetings or how we look at this court. It's hard. It's labor intensive. It's full of failures, small and large failures, learning opportunities, right, where we see that what we're doing isn't the right thing for these young people. But when you can change a life, and like I said, we're changing lives each and every day with our current participants and certainly the graduates who have gone through, it makes it worth it. And when I formulated this court and came up with this idea, we knew failure was going to be a part of it, right? When any human experiment is going to come with failures. But especially with this population, young adults, kids who have had, in many cases, a tough life, seen a lot of things they should have seen, and started many, many steps behind, other kids. And to me, there's some inherent fairnesses there. So we give them this opportunity to work for it, to change their lives if they really want it. They can get through the program. We support them. We love them. We help them. And it's something different that, again, I'm incredibly proud of. And, it's really been a labor of love, not only for me, but folks on my staff and judges who have been involved in the court and probation officers and the ROCA team. It's a village, but we all love it. We all love it, and we find it inspiring.
If you had the personnel and the funding, would you like to expand it?
Certainly. We talked a little bit about that yesterday at our celebration, and we were lucky to have some legislators there. I think if we had more resources, staff, and access to transportation, some of the big issues that I think the Commonwealth is facing, also on a much smaller level, we're facing as a court. Housing is a big issue. Transportation for these young people, the rising costs of everything, really stack up against our young people and against our court. So if we were to get some support financially, I think we could expand this. We've realized that this is going to be a long haul, learning what works, and we're at about 14 participants at present day. That's really at our capacity for the probation department and for ROCA. But a lot of conversation yesterday with the Lieutenant Governor and some other leadership. This should be in every jurisdiction in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. This opportunity for young people to help themselves and get themselves out of this life should be available at least in the metropolitan areas of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So if it spreads that way, I'll be proud and eager to help. But right now we're doing some really good things, and I'm proud of it.
Okay. I don't know how much federal dollars your office gets. You don't get federal dollars.
No.
So you don't have to worry about all of the stuff that's happening in Washington in terms of grants being canceled and programs being canceled. Or are you looking at this wondering how this will affect you? We have a new director of the FBI and a new assistant director of the FBI, both with interesting ideas. I'm trying not to be too partisan here. But the bottom line is, I was wondering the other day just how much an office like a district attorney's office in Massachusetts could be or would be affected by change in grant opportunities or cooperation opportunities. And I just wonder if this is something that you've seen sort of coming at you or not.
Well, we do have some grants that at least emanate from the federal government. So there are some immediate or direct financial implications potentially to the changes in Washington. So I spoke maybe a little too soon initially. We're certainly bracing for potential changes, right? We have a lot of partnerships and very strong connective tissue with the federal law enforcement agencies that work here locally. If they're redirected and their mission changes, then that's going to have an impact on public safety in Hampden County. It's going to have an impact on the relationships and the work and task forces that we've enjoyed for the duration of my tenure. And certainly there's a trickle-down effect as it relates to our financial status. So if the Commonwealth of Massachusetts depends or has historically gotten certain federal monies that support its larger budget, if there has to be, the belt tightening, that's going to affect every agency that has a line item, and that's hundreds of thousands of places, right? Including district attorneys' offices, sheriff's offices, cities, everybody in this region is going to feel it. And I think the Speaker of the House, Ron Mariano, has alluded to that. Like if we're going to lose out from the federal government, everybody's going to feel the pain. So we're certainly waiting with bated breath. We're hopeful that some of this stuff is saber rattling, both in the law enforcement space. There's some concern, I guess, and as well as from a financial perspective for everybody. I mean, if federal government turns the spigots off, everybody's going to be impacted. There's no question about it.
So 10 years in office. What's been your big lesson that you learned? You came into this as an experienced prosecutor and an attorney. You knew the system, you knew what the job was, but once you get to a job, then things manifest themselves that maybe you didn't anticipate, or maybe taught you something that you didn't anticipate learning. What's been the last 10 years like for you?
I can say this now, Mike. I knew very little coming into office, and that would have been the case for anybody, right?
Right.
No one really had been the district attorney who was running for office, and I had been in the office, as you intimated, for a number of years in different positions, and really understood how to prosecute a case. I didn't understand how to lead the office. And more to your question, I think what I've learned over 10 years is really among the most important things is leadership. Is caring about people who work for you and in your office, understanding the right things to say, the right things to do, the right ways to lead. And I think one of my proudest accomplishments is what we've created as an office and how it serves the public. I've got over 90 assistant district attorneys, right? I'm running the largest law firm probably west of Worcester.
Wow.
Another 80 or so employees. And we've really created a cohesive, functional, caring group of people. They care about their work, they care about their community that they serve, they care about victims, and they care about each other. And I've got some brilliant people working there, and that makes me very proud. They've chosen to work in this office, but they've chosen to serve the public that we all care so much about, and we're charged with serving. So learned a lot of things, about the particulars of the job, and certainly made some mistakes and learned from those. And I continue to learn every day, and I always will. But I think leadership has been that learning curve that I look back on, understand that, you're only as good as the people around you, and we've got some great people, and it's a great office, and that really allows me to do what I can do, and I think we're just serving the public in a really exemplary way.
Well, DA, thanks for the last 10 years. We look forward to seeing what you're doing in the next 10 years. If you want to stay there for another 10 years.
I hope the people have me back. Yeah.
And thank you very much for coming on Focus Springfield. We need to do this a little bit more often.
Let's do so. Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And folks, thanks very much for watching this edition of Government Matters here on Focus Springfield.